log variable to the audit variable.
Oh yeah, okay.
Okay, that's right. So I can come on this line, I can hit Control C and Control V, get a new entry for audit with the exact same stuff. And I can come in here and I can say, I want the S audit variable. All right, so now this log information will go to the audit file instead of going to the log file. And these logger programs, you could just use write to file, but this logger program is written so that the syntax of what the log entry looks like is the exact same for every entry, right? You got a timestamp, you have a level, a message level. If you want to use message levels in your thing, you've got a message action. So if you want to say this is the default action is info, but if you want your action to be error, then you could put the message here error. If you want it to be warning, you could make it warning. You can use those fields within the error file so that if you're looking at the error file and you really want to key on something valuable, you can find it using these little indexing components. The default separator in the log file in all of these write to files is the pipe symbol. But if you have a reason to change it, you can change the separator. And you can do that all from this function call. You don't have to go write that code to do all that. So, and the difference between logger 1, logger with no version, and logger version 2 is logger version 2 will actually print the message or display the message. In addition to writing it to the file, it will actually display it as part of the programming.
Nice.
So if you set the message timer to anything other than 0, not only will it log the message, but you'll see it when you're running the program. So if you're watching it run, you can see those messages as well as know that they're going to the log. If you set this to 0, then it won't display it. Even though it will log it, it won't display it.
Yeah. Well, you've seen my shell coding. I like to display stuff back to your screen as you're running stuff. It helps during
it does
troubleshooting,
especially during development.
Oh yeah.
If you don't use the version 2, and I really need to create a template that converts all these loggers to version 2, and I really need to add, not only do I want the audit log, but I also, not only do I really want the logger file up, initialized, I really want the audit log initialized as well. But they really should be logger v2s and not loggers. So hopefully in the near future, we'll build a bot template version 2 and we'll make that update in here. I toyed with making the logger program just logger version 2 and get rid of the version 2 and just update logger with all that stuff. But that affects every single bot that's out there now. And even though this would be a new input, none of the existing programs would have this value set. It would default to empty, and the new program would have to compensate for the fact that existing programs are going to pass nothing into it, and new programs are going to pass, a number here. I guess because this is a number, it'll default to 0, which is probably okay. But to be safe, I named it V2. That means it's a different call, and therefore you actually got to call it explicitly if you want the version 2 logger. So that's where we are on it. Anyway, and the other nice thing in the logging is you always get a bot completed message and you always get a bot started message in the log. And that's helpful when you're looking at the logs, is to know when your bots start and when they stop, and you kind of highlight those actions in the log. All
And
right.
the log has the entire history of you running it,
The
or just
log,
the most current?
okay, so here's the next coolest thing.
Okay.
This is so cool, Joe.
I can't wait.
I was so all right. If you're gonna, every single bot by default, when you call the get config, it will look for a master XLS config file. I don't know how I got this messed up here.
Yeah, overrode or deleted something, that's all.
All right. When we put the template out here, I couldn't always guarantee that somebody would come out here and build this, and then so the master isn't required. None of these config files are required. Even if you call the program and there's no config file, you're gonna get 8 things set in the config variable by default. You're gonna get the environment and you're gonna get the paths built automatically. But if you use this master, then you also get all this other stuff. You'll get, so when you come in here, the first thing you have to do on a new program is tell us where you are, because I haven't figured out a way for Excel to know where it is in the path structure. But you've got to change this entry and you got to change this entry. And when you do that, the RPA DIR is going to get updated because this is a formula. This is a concatenation of these 3 fields. Okay.
Oh, okay.
All right. And then later on, when we actually run the program, you notice we're not setting the environment here. Okay. The environment is determined at runtime by get config. It looks at the URL and it says, hey, am I in dev? All right, if I'm in dev, then I'm going to set the env and the env upper, I'm going to set them to dev or QA or prod. If you wanted to override the env variable, then you would change this name to env and you would set it here. Right.
All right. So you're hard coding it, right?
So you could hard code it in your config file. Right. If you wanted to be in dev, but you wanted it to look like you were in prod, you could do that.
Okay.
Okay. I didn't know whether or not anybody would want to do that. So I felt like it was interesting that we could do this, but in order to be safe, these variables are not set. They got the X in front of them. If you did set it, you'd have to know that it's different than the env that we pick up by default.
Gotcha.
You also get the log files.
I saw that.
Oh, this is wrong. What happened here?
Wait a minute. What's wrong?
How is that possible? I don't believe that. Huh.
Oh, it's a good thing we did this. I don't know what's wrong with them yet, but what do you see?
Oh no. Hold on. Save. Let's look at this other one in here. What has this one got? Oh, this one's got it right. All right. This is what it should have. Let me look. I'm curious out here now.
Well, I see it has an 805. Is that what was missing?
Yeah, the date was missing.
Oh, that's a date? Okay.
Yeah. RPA, operation, finance is good. And credit hold. And UAT. And logs. Yeah, okay. That's what I did. All right. I'm going to have to go fix that master. The key is this. You notice when we read these config files, they're Excel files. The advantage that we get with Excel is that we can use formulas to help us manage entries. So if I had to build in AA code a log file with a date, I'd have to program a date function. I'd have to get the date value that I wanted. I'd have to convert it to a string, and then I'd have to concatenate it with this log file to assign it to a variable to finally get the log file name. But since we can read this whole config file structure, we created a variable in the Excel file called date. Now you can use this date in your program, but we also used it in concatenation with our error file, our audit file, and our log file. So this automatically gives every single bot that's written a 24-hour log file. So
Gotcha.
every time it runs, when you automatically get to the next day and you run, the bot runs and it reads the config, it will create the log file based on the day, the month and day timestamp.
Well, that was a better question than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Damn. Okay.
So this was just so cool that we could put these formulas in here, and I've done other config files with some really cool little formulas in there. But this is a formula for the logs, and this RPA directory is a formula to make it easy to set the business unit and the project name, right? This is really the business unit, and this, let's do this.
Yeah.
Business unit, I spelled that wrong, and this is the project name. Now you can have as many layers of business unit as you want. The program will concatenate all those things and figure it out. Um, However, there is a scenario where Diane has separated prod programs from QA programs, because when you write the program in the QA environment and you're using SAP screens and you do screen capture, sometimes the QA screens are different than the same screen that you see in QA is different than the screen you see in production.
True that. Okay.
Right. So in order for her to handle that, she actually has um, credit release, and then she's got QA and prod as separators, so that, and it's completely separate code for QA versus prod, and it's simply because we've got screen variables in there that are different.
And is that set by the config file? Is that how she manages it?
Yeah, the config, well, with the credit release programming, we didn't have the luxury of these config files. So that's the only bot that doesn't use config files. All the bots after that, we realized we needed a config file pretty quickly. We just didn't have a program. Nobody built a program that you could just go pick up and use. So we built our own, And this would be something that I think we could put up on the AA portal and share it with other people.
This is not a lot different than the config files we use for our Axway monitors. I mean,
exactly. This
basically,
is
yeah.
just like an INI file.
Yeah.
We just call it, we just put it in Excel format because we get advantages with having some small access to some small Excel features that actually make this file really valuable to us.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So once you start down that road, you see all sorts of applications, usage applications for the Excel that you could use in the future. Yeah.
Right. So one of the things that came up was, let's say, so when you look at this config file, you're going to say, well, why do we have two files? Well, let's say you do have bot1, bot2, and bot3. You can have separate config files for bot1. It would just be bot1 XLS, bot2 XLS, and bot3 XLS. We started out with the config like that, where every bot had its own config file and that was it.
Mm.
But then we ran into the situation where I had to go edit a config file, and the same thing that I edited had to be edited in all of them. And I was like, oh, that's a pain. All right, so let's give the bot programmer the ability to to have a master. The master config is reserved for things that are global to all your bots.
Right.
And
Right.
then
Yeah.
the only thing that you want to put in bot 1, bot 2, or bot 3 are the things that are kind of specific to that one bot as a config option.
Sure.
So for example, all of these variables are in the master because they're not going to change. There'd be no reason to, I can't think of a good reason why I'd want to change the log files or I'd want to change something. Doesn't mean you can't. Just include that variable in your bot 1 and change it. Okay. But it's not necessary to include it. Things like email addresses and the such, right? The master might want to have email addresses that are specific to operations team so that we get emails when things don't run right. But there could be a bot that you build that needs email information for the customer or for the owner of the program, and so that they get email. And you don't really need to put that stuff in the master. You would want to put that in the bot config that is sending email. That's where you'd want to put it. So if the program runs and you call the get config to common bot, the first thing it'll do is read in the master file, and the second thing it'll do is look for a config file that's based on the bot name. If it finds the bot name config, it'll read it too and include it. And any of those settings that are duplicates against the master will get changed to match what's in the bot config. So that's why there's two files in here. One's called master and one's called app name config, because you can change this app name config to be whatever your bot name is. And then you now have two config files. One is conditional and one is global.
Nice.
All right, cool. Um,
Mm-hmm.
all right, so now you pretty much have I don't know why we're going to put that on the recording. Go back here. Oh, come on. There we go. So now you're in here and you've got your bot 1 template and you're pretty much ready to go. And like I said, if all you wanted to do was start with a blank bot, you can just hit create bot. And you can give it, test XYZ. and now you got a blank bot. Go do something with it. If you're going to start with a blank bot, my usual first activity is to come down to step and add a step to this. And it can't hurt to add 2 or 3 steps. I'm just trying to double click this. And then I move these so that they're all at the same level. I move them up so that they all work out to be the same level. Now, when you work with some testing code, you would put it in here. And then if you're testing something and you finally figure out how to make it work, then you can copy it and go put it in your real bot. But then you might want to test something else. So then you can come in here on your test one stuff. You can just disable it, and everything that you put in here is now turned off. And then you've got space in here to do some experimenting with some other code, and you don't lose anything that you were playing with in case you need it again. But you could certainly create a new bot called, one could be test XLS, the other could be, test email. If you want to just learn how to make the email program work. And so, you're free to do that, but any of these bots that don't have the BMC template, bot template boilerplate on it, you'll have to come back and add that boilerplate to it, because we'll need the logging and we'll need the ability to have all that configuration information available to the execution of the program.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like I put the bash profile, or you created that util profile that we read in every program. So it's a
Right.
similar
Similar
concept.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And nothing says, like, if you're in bot, let's not do bot one, but let's say you're in your test thing here. Um, your first step could still be come down here to task bot and run. Come on. Oh, drag it over here. Double click it. All right. So now I've got my run command, and let's put it in that step. Right. So now you can browse to the control room and go get the bot config thing and add it to your program. You could get the logger and add it in here to your program. But this is how you would go to, and even if you had a bot one in your program and you wanted to call bot two, okay, this is the same thing. You'd come in here, it's going to default to your current location, right? So if bot one wanted to call the template, you just come in here and pick it and choose it, and then it's going to tell you, okay, this is an option. You can pass in a config file, a config variable if you want to.
Oh, okay.
But this is how you make a call to another program, right? And then if
I have a question before you go
mhm.
too much further. So for each step, you have to import the two. Sounds like to me there's two config files that we need to put in: the logger2 and the other config. I forget what it's called.
Yeah, the get config and the loggers are two. The get config you want to call, because that's going to let you read in the INI information that you're going to need for your program. The loggers are task bots that you can call that make logging easy.
But are
So
they needed in each step, or are they part of the
no,
project?
they're only needed when you want it. When you want to log something, that's when you need the logger.
So you don't need them for each step, in other words. That's where I'm kind of losing it. Is like, how do I know I need, okay, if I have to log something, I
Well, if
obviously,
you got a loop, right? Let's say
yeah.
you're in a loop and you want, let's say, now there's a couple, there's, so When you're building a program, you might just want a message box as you're going through a loop. So let's say we got a loop here. All right. And the first thing we want to do in that loop is we want to print the first record of information. Maybe not the entire record, but something in that variable that we're looping on, we want to print, we want to display it. So that the loop gets assigned to a variable. And then when we come in the message box, we pick the variable name. Let's assume it's called sample string. And we then display the sample string message.
Ah.
Okay. Now this loop could be, it could be the elements of an Excel file that you opened. It could be the elements of a text file that you opened. It could be the contents of the data dictionary that was opened when you ran the config program, right? The loop can be, you got to tell the loop all these different things about what data you want to loop in. It could be, if you've got the email program connected, then you might be looping through a mailbox. So you can tell it, here, I want to do a loop. Here's the mailbox that's open. I want to loop through all of the records that match a criteria for email. If you've got, you can loop through files that are in a folder or folders that are in a folder. I don't like their file looping because they separate these two. Very difficult to loop through every single folder and every single file in a hierarchy using the AA tool set. But it's there. You can figure it out if you have to.
Yeah, it's too bad because it's built in.
You got lists. You can, you got a list variable, you got a data dictionary variable, you got a database package that you can loop through database records, or you can loop through Excel records. So all of those loops exist. If you're scratching your head and you're saying, I got this data in the memory, how do I go look at it? Chances are you got to use a loop to go look at it. Sometimes it's that you just don't want to do that, but that's the only way to get to the data, is to put it in a loop. I mean, I've got loops that are just a loop of one record. Right? The loop, the variable is either going to have one record or zero. Or, I mean, if something exists, then it's going to have one record, and if it doesn't exist, it's going to have zero records. So sometimes you just got to check it that way. So anyway,
Cool.
Yeah. So this would be the the basics of getting started in this space. Now, even if I come into this private space and I come down here privately and create, you notice I have Jose, Matt, and Tom. Okay. This is my copy of Jose, Matt, and Tom. It's not their copy. So these copies actually mean nothing. Now, when these copies actually get populated is if I come to public and I go into Matt's directory, and Matt has, Matt has put back into public this program called Get IQBot. I can now export this and get a copy of it.
I see it's version 2.
Right.
Version
But
4.
all these other things that I've got here under Matt, they might the only reason they might be here is because I stole his ID, that stuff. Otherwise, I technically wouldn't be able to see this stuff, because I shouldn't be able to see any of the things that are new that he created.